you usually wouldn't use cleans, what would be the reason to not use them or to use them in this case?
I'm of the opinion that cleans are kind of non-essential. It might be a point of dispute among us.
The female athlete that you see a degradation in her speed when she's doing, let's say, full range of motion movements and single leg squats, something like that.
There's sort of that universal chicken versus egg problem, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, we identify that, great athletes are good at a lot of things. Has any one of those particular things made them good at all of them? They got a 40-inch vert and they barely have to bend their knees because they're just that explosive, and that's why they're the most explosive athletes in the world, Dane. No, I'm just messing with you.
I feel attacked. We're going to give you a podcast with Daniel Back of Jump Science, and we cover every single facet around explosive-based training. We even have a debate around weightlifting, and if weightlifting exercises are absolutely necessary or even effective for developing explosive-based work. And then we get into things like weekly splits and how he breaks down specific exercises and how he views them and their impact on the overall training. So we cover every single topic inside this podcast. I hope you guys enjoy this. If you need help with that training, click the first link in the description to head over to peakstrength.app. Now, let's get to the podcast. Okay, Coach Back. So when I'm watching you, I watch some of your stuff on Instagram, and if I'm seeing like an athlete doing the scissor jump, my first thought was, first, I want to tell you when I watch things, I try to think about how I can piece that into my own training. But then my first initial instinct is like, you're having an athlete, let's say it looked, maybe she's a high jumper. I don't know. I'm sort of projecting what type of athlete they would be, but how do you factor that into like a weekly split or a weekly setup for your training?
So she's actually not a high jumper. First of all, she's long triple and short sprinter. And so scissor kicking for her is in the category of what I would call fun jumps. So it's non-specific jumping. So just a means of developing leg power would be kind of a simple way to describe the purpose of it, which I actually use with pretty much all my athletes. So whether they're in a jumping sport or not, I want to have them jump in a way that's fun and try to like conquer challenges, because I think that's a great just general athletic development tool. So in terms of programming, she's early off season right now for track. So she basically just has two jumping and strength days per week, and then she's doing a fair amount of easy running. And so the easy running is, it's easy enough that it can be done basically any time. So it's really just two days per week on the jumping and the lifting, and there's going to be like I have a day of kind of more of the fun jump type things, and then I have a day that's a little bit more a little bit more long and triple jump oriented. Again, it's early off season, so we're not like full approach jumping into a pit or anything right now. We're just doing like hopping and bounding drills, or just, doing some takeoffs off of 6 steps for long jump, that type of thing. So yeah, pretty simple in the programming sense right now. It's just the 2 days, and really that type of jump could go on either day.
Okay. So you're taking like a scissor jump, and you're saying there's a challenge of trying to clear this. Maybe every week you raise it a half inch or whatever it might be, and they figure out how to conquer that. So it's under the umbrella of fun. And then you have another jumps day that would be more, specific to the actual sport or the athlete that you're dealing with, whether in this case it'd be, a horizontal jumper.
Mm-hmm.
When you're setting up the strength days, what are they doing in the weight room on those 2 strength days?
So basically have a deadlift day and a squat day. Although with that particular athlete, she's doing a clean variation on both days as well, which is actually not something I include very often. So yeah, she's got a clean and squat and then a clean and deadlift, and then both days have an additional, quad, hamstring, calf, abs, that type of thing. And it's not, some of those things aren't real strictly planned. I think there's a lot of ways you can train some quad strength. So, try to cycle through exercises, keep things interesting. Yeah, like yesterday she did just a skater squat, heel elevated skater squat, trying to get her back knee down to the ground as close as possible. And I ended up putting her hands on her hips because I didn't want her to get as low. Wanted to make it tough at a little bit higher range. So, yeah. So nothing too complex in there. Yeah, after the kind of the big lift, quote unquote, then it's just, yeah, hamstrings, quads, calves, core. Pretty
So
simple.
when you said like you have a clean and a squat or a clean and a deadlift, and you mentioned like you usually wouldn't use cleans, what would be the reason to not use them or to use them in this case?
Well, I'm of the opinion that cleans are kind of non-essential, which it might be a point of dispute among us. but
You're a bad person.
but yeah, the reason being basically that what we really need out of the weight room is just basic strength, at least with the population I'm working with, and I really want to train explosively with sprinting, jumping, plyos, change of direction, like sort of all the athletic things. Well, not that cleans aren't athletic, but all the like fast paced, short contact time, those types of activities. And in my opinion, if you're doing all those activities, that kind of makes the explosive nature of cleans and snatches kind of insignificant. So I view those as just being a part of strength training. And if it's part of strength training, obviously you don't need to do cleans to get strong. So that's why I view it as kind of non-essential. The other thing is, a lot of the athletes that I work with have lifting that they do with their teams or their clubs or whatever. And so I'm oftentimes just kind of filling in gaps in that department, and also oftentimes have limited time with them. And so, yeah, Olympic lifts tend to not be part of the formula for me. Obviously, like with the football guys, they're cleaning twice a week at school already.
Right.
So in their case, they're getting it elsewhere. Some of the other athletes, well, yeah, even at the track off season period, sometimes they're doing cleans. Although, it's large group setting at a high school tends to be, like this other girl that I train who does the cleans at the school. She has tens on the bar, and she's definitely capable of doing quite a bit more. But it'll be like, tens on the bar, and they're doing like 4 sets of 8 or something, which, to me is just like, it's obviously not an optimal clean session in my opinion. I think,
Right.
little lower reps and higher weight would be a good thing there. But that's kind of how those big group things tend to go. But so anyway, it's a lot about the context for me, and just the time that I have where cleans just aren't a priority. In the case of this particular athlete, this jumper, she has like a true off season actually for the first time here, because previous years she's played volleyball in the fall, so she's got a true off season. I know she's going to be consistently coming in, and I have the time to work with her. And then the other aspect is she has a very clear negative response in her speed to things like deeper squats and split squats. So I actually use those sparingly. So for example, like I talked about the squat day, she's actually box squatting almost every week instead of regular squatting, because it's less disruptive to her speed. And so I'm in her case more kind of more inclined to use the, little shorter range of motion, more like high intent, explosive type of strength stimulus. And so for her, I think, I like having cleans as a tool, and I just started using them with her because, again, it's the first time that we're having like a extended off season period to work on strength. Previously,
Right.
it's been, volleyball and then volleyball, track season, and then, not necessarily seeing her very much at times of the year. But now we've got, till indoor meets in December and January to just train. So yeah, we're using that, and I'm looking forward to, like, in spite of my opinion of cleans, I mean, I'm looking forward to her, adding 30 pounds to that, and I think that's going to have a positive impact on her jumping. So yeah.
What's up, guys? Our podcast and our channel are sponsored by our own strength training app, Peak Strength. The entire focus of Peak Strength is to provide you guys with the absolute best sports performance app that you could ever imagine. We build out the programs on the back end. We take in all of these different decisions that we learned here on site at Garage Strength so that we can then apply it to you so you can improve your training. So if you guys want to improve your overall sports performance, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength. You'll get a free week of training, and then you can start getting on those gains, get those reps done so that you can become a champion. Now, let's get back to the video. Peace. I was gonna say one thing I like, one post you put up that made me, I really liked it. It was the jumpers have a high correlation to being able to execute and demonstrate like a snatch or a clean, right?
Yes.
And I was gonna bring up like the rumor, and a few jumps coaches I've talked to have talked about this, where someone like Jonathan Edwards could power clean between 140 and 150.
Yeah.
Even using, I'm friends with Thea LaFond, and last year she was, doing 90K power cleans at like 1.8 meters per second for triples, like 2 weeks out from the Olympics.
Yeah.
And my argument when I was watching that, because I agreed with it, I was then thinking, in my experience, okay, jumpers have a high correlation to clean, and I've seen people who have a good clean have a high correlation to other strength movements. I don't know if it's necessarily an argument, but more so that, like, is it the jumping ability, or is it like some of our athletes that clean well, they just happen to be really good at other strength movements? So there's like a carryover also from the clean to the other movements. That transfer tends to be there. That would be like my argument for the cleans, I guess, was where I was going.
Right. Yeah. So there's sort of that universal chicken versus egg problem, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
okay, yeah, we identify that, great athletes are good at a lot of things. Has any one of those particular things made them good at all of them? Right. So kind of to expand on that post you were talking about, my key point in that is that if you train, sprinting and jumping for your whole life, that develops a level of general explosiveness, and that allows you to excel in something like a clean or a snatch, if you obviously practice it a little bit and develop the technique, right? Like, that's
Right.
a key element. And it'll allow you to excel at a, like, even to a level where it's disproportionate to other lifts. So, for example,
you showed the snatch. The snatch was a high percentage of the dude's back squat.
yes,
I like that.
exactly. So that was me in 2018. Hang power snatching at the time, maybe like 65 or whatever percent of my back squat. And so then if you look at, which is really, I mean, some people just say it's a testament to how terrible my back squat is, but
That's okay.
if you look at weightlifters that specialize in clean and snatch, you typically are going to actually see a little bit of a lower percentage relative to their back squat. Well, particularly if you're talking about powers. And so then to me, I'm like, okay, so in a sense, the jumpers are actually better at power clean relative to their capabilities in general than the weightlifter.
Yeah,
Even though,
I make
even
that argument a lot with the throwers. A
yeah,
lot.
even though the weightlifter specializes in that, and so to me that tells you that
And the
okay,
weightlifters, their absolute height, the maximum might be substantially higher. It doesn't matter. The jumper or the thrower in these cases is still better at the powers
yes, yes,
relative to the maximum squat usually.
yep, and
The difference
so
with throwers is throwers sometimes will have insane back squats, so it's not
right,
always as accurate as it would be with a high jumper or a long jumper potentially.
right, and so yeah, to me then that tells us like okay, well, jumping and sprinting with body weight as a career makes you really good at explosive lifting naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that, when you see the jumper doing the cleans, it's like, okay, well, they're able to demonstrate that power because of their jumping. It doesn't necessarily mean that doing the cleans made them jump higher
Right.
or like made them into the jumper that they are.
I actually think this might be where when we were talking about this off air is you just commented, how are you defining explosiveness, which is so I love this question, and I've posed this a lot. One of my friends is a biomechanist, Christoph Kipp, and I'm always like, give me a clear definition on explosiveness or impulse or something that we can just use and be like, okay, this is the speed or the reaction time frame that we are going to be using this definition of impulse to, or maybe it's explosiveness to impulse to whatever, as we would go down the spectrum. And maybe the discussion is more so the body weight to, so you're saying like somebody who jumps and somebody who sprints a lot is going to be really good at explosive lifting, right? Like explosive lifting. So they might be able to do a trap bar jump really well with a heavier load, or
Yes.
power snatch higher relative to their back squat than a weightlifter. But you could also then, I would say in my experience, also say, well, heavier athletes, so let's say a D tackle or a shot putter or discus thrower, they might, because they are heavier, it actually you could, in my experience, would be they benefit more from the cleans helping them jump higher because their load is usually quite a bit higher. Their body weight is quite a bit higher than, let's say, a jumper. And there could be some point of like, it wouldn't be perfect, but there could be some body weight point that you're like, okay, right around this range is where it might tilt this way. I don't want to say force velocity because I think that's bullshit, but I think like along those lines to a point. I don't know if that even makes sense when I'm explaining it to you.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's like if your body weight's heavier, then you need to train heavier, essentially, is what it is, right?
Right. If you're in a sport that it has rapid rates of recruitment, like football or throwing, or I'm trying to, because in football they would be a rugby maybe where you would have athletes on the field that could be 80 kilos versus you would still have 120 kilo athletes on the 265. And
Right.
I have, with our athletes, I don't know what you think about this. Our trainers, we've talked about, we use body weight ratios for strength up until someone is right around 120K. And then
Mm,
we decrease that because we've seen a kid who's 300 pounds can still have a 300, or a kid who's 300 pounds can still have a 30-inch vertical, but their body weight ratio with their strength might actually be substantially worse than the guy who's lighter.
sure,
I don't
yeah.
know if you, yeah.
Well, and then height comes into play there too.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Obviously, I mean, the heavier athletes aren't always taller, but if it's like, a big dude, then obviously they tend to be taller. And then that, in particular, typically makes your knee bending exercises tougher.
Right.
Not always, but then also with the longer body, you can take more time to generate the impulse for a vertical. But then still get off the ground because your end velocity can be the same, but you just take more time to get there since you're moving a longer, heavier body. And so, yeah, I can definitely see how the end vertical jump height can be achieved, but maybe in different ways between those two types of athletes. And the one the ability to rapidly accelerate for a smaller athlete, yeah, typically going to be associated with a higher relative strength level. So that, I mean, that kind of lines up.
Hmm. Okay, before we go into this further, I wanted you to break down. You talked about your easy running. How do you set up like in an off season program? Typically, like what those running days would look like.
Yeah. So when I say easy, like I mean easy. Um, and I view it as, you know, volume running is just like it's plyometric training is the way I view it. It's just low intensity plyometric training. So we're not talking about hard conditioning. We're not talking about training endurance. There's obviously some level of fitness that comes with it, but I mean, we're talking about an easy jog for 10 minutes. We're talking about jog 30 seconds, walk for a minute, and do that 10 plus times. So you're just accumulating foot contacts. And then so those are, I mean, kind of like the two easiest ones. And then I have like a 8 to 10 reps of 100 on grass or turf, and 70 to 80% effort. So yeah, maybe it's like 100 yards in 14 to 16 seconds, depending on who the athlete is. So it's really not, it's not conditioning. It's not hard at all. It's just accumulating those foot contacts.
Okay.
And again, the timing on those is like, well, whenever it works for you. Like I have athletes doing it on their own, and it's like, if they do an easy 10-minute jog and then come see me the next day, it's like, that's fine. It's minimal
Yeah. Right. Okay.
like training cost. So I mean, at a time when we're going to get more into the medium running, then I would tend to do more like okay, intense day with me, medium running the next day, rest day, intense day with me, medium running medium running on their own, rest day, something like that. We have 4 days, and then you're trying to get the rest before the high intensity day. But yeah, the early phase right now where the running is as easy as it is, the timing honestly is like super flexible.
Okay. I'm just trying to like I think I can see how the weekly split then is. So maybe this is a question then. Do you go maybe you see you're saying easy running when they come with you? Are they going to be doing higher intensity jump stuff? Or are they going to be doing their general strength stuff?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where I want to go now is like you mentioned, and you have one post that's very clear on this. Like there's 5 things every athlete's got to work on, or maybe it's younger athletes, but it was, I think it was sprint, jump, change of direction, general strength, and maybe bouncing.
Bouncing, yeah, like
Okay.
plyo, yeah.
Okay. So give us, maybe 3 exercises per each one of those. I'm assuming, the sprint could be in theory 70% 100-yard on grass could be one. Is there, 2 to 3 other sprint things that you use as like clear training tools?
I mean, 30-meter sprint, 50-meter sprint, 60. I mean, and I
Okay.
actually, yeah, I mean, any distance, a short-ish sprint is good. I actually like to get non-track athletes able to sprint a 60 well. I think that's a good tool for them, to get a little bit more exposure to max velocity. And yeah, I think the field sport athletes tend to, or at least some people kind of push in that space, like, oh well, you only need to sprint 25 yards because that's enough to just touch your max velocity, and there's no point in going any further for a team sport athlete. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I want to get more exposure, because in my view, sprinting is general athletic development, the same way strength training is. So
Yeah.
even if your sport, you never sprint past 10 yards or whatever, and then you're going to cut, or you're going to slow down or something, or you're going to curve. so you don't actually touch max velocity in your training, that doesn't mean doing max velocity is pointless, right? You don't have a barbell on your back out on the field, but doing strength training is still serving a
That's
purpose,
exactly.
right?
I think that's the whole thing is like when I hear people say stuff like that. And now, maybe in a sport like baseball, I'll be honest, a sport like baseball, I might not do as much max velocity work. But I was going to bring this up as a comparison is like, because I used to follow in this camp, I had a limited space. I didn't have places to run a lot of high speed stuff. We ran a lot on a hill. So I was going to ask you about resisted sprints or hill sprints. I did want to know your take on that.
Yep.
But I think the argument of that, oh well, my sport, it's played it's basketball, right? I don't need to do max velocity work. But that same argument would be it would be like a 1,500-meter runner never running more than 60 minutes, right? Or never running more than 3.5 minutes. But a 1,500-meter runner will go out and will run 60 to 90 minutes at a time.
Yes.
Because they know that long, slow distance plays a role in their adaptation to then improve the way that their cardiac output might happen when they're down at higher intensity. And I think that that's like a misconception that it's like, dude, that Ken Clark's got a whole bunch of research that shows like if max velocity is hit consistently, you're actually going to get better at acceleration too. So in
Yes.
theory, it's like, no, your acceleration would improve.
It bleeds down. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole concept of like training transfer and general development. So there's a physical stimulus, a physical quality that we're trying to get from max velocity, and you gotta do some of it to get
Yeah.
that physical quality. And yeah, so it's not about you know becoming a expert of max velocity or like trying to use max velocity mechanics in your football route or something. It's we're developing a physical trait, and that's going to transfer to lots of different things. In fact,
Right.
I even have the experience. Okay, so also I'm a fan of resisted sprints.
Okay.
That was going to be the next thing that I said as my like sort of my sprinting exercise. And we have a 1080 sprint where I coach, so I get those measurements, those outputs, and I have the experience of after track season, the track athletes, once they kind of get some rest and they get fresh, they usually have some day where they just like blow all their numbers out of the water. I call it like I always say like that was your outlier day, like that one's gonna be tough to beat. But so that they will beat their like fairly heavy resistance, which so like 10 or 15 kilos on the 1080 sprint, which it doesn't sound like much, but it's heavier than it sounds. It's not like having 10 kilos on a sled.
Yeah.
So fairly heavy resistance, and they'll beat those numbers over 20 meters or even over 10 meters after track season, where they're doing like a whole bunch of upright running and sprinting. And so they're not a big focus on acceleration during track season. Obviously, I mean, block starts are in there, but it's like if you look at their total training, it's like way more upright running and conditioning and all this stuff. And then also typically there's a reduction of strength training involved in track season. I know for the 4 athletes that I can think of right off the top of my head that I work with in track, like that is little to no lifting the back half of track season, and yet they still come in and they'll break their resisted sprint records after all that. So not even just translating to a sprint start, but translating to a resisted sprint start. And then that day, that the outlier day, they may have a hard time beating that like for much of the off season.
Okay. So my question would be, so your argument is they do a lot of max velocity work inside track season. They're not doing a lot of acceleration work. They cut their strength training, and then after track season comes in, or after track season they come. Let's say it's 2 to 3 weeks later, within that time frame. So it could be a week to 3 weeks. They PR on a resisted sprint, and a strength coach would make this argument. Well, that doesn't make sense. Research would show that does make sense. My next question would be like, maybe their track coach fucked up their peak. Um, but
Well,
but it is.
that's another topic. Is you probably could have rested some more towards the end of the season, and that would have been good for some of your performances. Although there's a case where it's like you got to maintain some level of fitness for sprinting 100 meters.
If you're going through the rounds, especially, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I've had that question. I was like, man, if you would have got 2 more weeks where you barely had to train, you might have gone even faster. You might have jumped even farther or whatever. Because yeah, there tends to be a little bit of a bounce back after some rest. So yeah,
Well,
that's a
okay.
that's a whole other topic.
So using resisted sprints, you said like 10 to 15K for how far would you use that possibly in training?
10 to 20 meters.
Okay. Um, okay. So you had brought up earlier. So let's say, you had mentioned there's two things you mentioned here. 60 meters. You like athletes to be able to execute a good 60-meter sprint effectively, even field sport athletes. You
Hmm.
also mentioned with the female athlete that you see a degradation in her speed when she's doing, let's say, full range of motion movements and single leg squats, something like that. What are you using to assess to make sure that she is actually having a degradation in speed? Like, is there a specific assessment that you've seen, like when we do timed 40s or whatever that drops off? Is there, or a flying 10? Is there anything that you use as like a maybe like a checkpoint inside your training as that assessment?
Yeah, it's fly times.
Okay,
Yeah.
so flying 10.
I like to go a little farther. I've done 15, I've done 20. Um, yeah, kind of depends on the situation where I'm at because I historically have done this by filming in a high frame rate, and I have essentially set up some things for them to run through, and then you can time off of that, and then. But my track situation has changed in the past year where there's now a building over the track, and so I can't. I had to shift where I filmed down here, and now there's another like canopy thing at the end of the building. It's constantly evolving over there. But now I can't film a fly time at the facility, so I got to go over to the oval track for that at the middle school.
Okay.
So yeah, the distance varies quite a bit, but yeah, it's a fly time is how I get that feedback.
Do you ever use radar on fly times?
No, we've had, I mean, I think like every type of technology that you can think of has been in the building at some point.
Okay.
And I've always ended up just going with my video timing for reliability.
Okay. Are
Yeah.
you filming at like 240 frames per second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So there's obviously a little bit of judgment involved with like where they're passing through the gates on the video, but I'm always pessimistic, so I'll be like really strict with the
Yeah,
timing.
you're like, no, this sucked. I'm going to start it right here instead of right here.
Yep, exactly. You're not getting that extra hundredth off. Yep.
Okay. So with the sprints, you gave us 100, the 30, the 60 resisted sprints, 10 to 15K, 10 to 20 meters. Assessments, you could be doing flying 10 to 20s. And then, being able to proficiently execute a 60-meter sprint is as ideal. Um, if we go into each of these then with a jump, can you break down, I guess maybe what's the difference between jumps and bouncing in your definition?
Yeah, so the lines can get a little blurry there, but basically bouncing would be okay, we're trying to get off the ground fast, whereas jumping would be we have some type of target output of height or distance. Okay, so pogos, you're just bouncing off the ground quick. You're not necessarily trying to go as high as you possibly can or as far as you possibly can. You're just getting those contacts of quick off the ground. Tuck jumps, same thing. So we're bouncing off the ground fast. We don't have like a large height target on tuck jumps. Hopping. So hopping and bounding is where it can get blurry because hopping and bounding, you can do, okay, we're just smooth, we're bouncing off the ground, we're trying to get good pop, and that's it. And so that would be the bouncing category. But then if you obviously you can take hopping or bounding to, okay, let's go as far as possible. And that's where it's like, yes, it's kind of a jump, kind of a plyo. It's actually sort of both.
It's almost like same with hurdle hops. If you're doing bilateral hurdle hops, you could just you put the hurdle hops at the lowest height. Yo, we want a quick reaction, or we put them
Yes.
at the highest height, and it's like, yo, this is a target. If you clip your feet, you're gonna die,
Right.
and that
So
would be
then it
more
turns
like a
into more of a jump
jump.
versus a
Okay.
plyo. Yeah.
It almost seems like a designated, maybe for the listener too. It's like a designated target would be the jump. So you're theoretically more intense, and it could even be like a double leg bound over 30 yards, and you want to get 30 or 20 yards, and you want to get across 20 yards in as few jumps as possible.
Yes.
Versus bouncing is like, act like a freaking kangaroo, or a
Yep.
rabbit,
Exactly.
whatever. Okay.
It's like the
Uh,
contact is the goal versus like the external target is the goal.
okay, that's cool. I like that yeah, it's abstract, but it's also practical. I think that's pretty good. So what would you use then for a jumping based assessment?
I mean, standing broad jump for sure. And then I do like to do, like approach vertical jumps. That kind of depends on the athlete, like what they're going to be, what they're going to be able to do well. So, in terms of an assessment, like for example, volleyball, I don't always want to assess their 1 foot vertical, just because it's the whole process is a challenge sometimes, and it's like just a negative experience. So it's like I wouldn't go with their running vert off one as like a key assessment. Um,
I'm even
yeah,
just trying to visualize a volleyball player jumping off of 1 foot.
it can be a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Some of the
wait,
middles they do a slide where they run down the net and jump
okay,
off of 1 foot, and so then they can do it. But yeah, a lot of them are like very programmed into 2 foot jumping. So I might have them do a 1 foot jump, but I won't necessarily use it as like a measure of progress because it's just a hard thing for them. But I do like I like the challenge of getting people to do an approach jump when they haven't. I think that's a good coordination challenge. It can be fun. Again, if you do it less of a test and more of a, like we said, the target, it can be a fun way for them to get some output. But yeah, using that as an assessment, it's kind of an artistic approach. Like, is this going to be a good assessment for this person? Um, yeah, and then the hopping and bounding, I do like to use that as a bit of an assessment. Again, that's sort of blending the plyos and the jump. But if somebody
and
is
this would be
hopping
for the
on one
bouncing
foot
section.
and they're going 7 yards in 5 hops, and then they take that to 10 yards in 5 hops after a couple months, like that's a really good thing for their athleticism. So yeah, that I tend to use either hopping or bounding, um, depending on which one kind of works better for that person. Then obviously the triple jumpers they got to do both.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and they're obviously they're hopping and bounding at levels beyond other athletes.
It's funny because you actually posted the video of a depth drop to a hurdle hop for the bounce, but it was a chick doing it, and she minimal knee bend in my recollection, and I
Yes,
remember thinking, okay, that looks like a bounce.
the hurdle was low.
Yeah, 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 and it's almost like maybe establishing, if the counter movement gets a little bit deeper, it's probably much more so of a jump, I would assume.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yep. And yeah, the height that she was dropping from, like most athletes would not be, that fast off the ground from that height.
What do
But
you think's a good
she's,
height for depth drops usually?
uh, well, for the depth jump where you're going to bounce over something,
Yeah.
um, I tend to start that at about 24 inches, but I don't use them very often because most athletes aren't going to do it very well from that height. At least, I mean, not the high schoolers. And my thing is, if they're not able to do it from that height, well, then we can just do high pogos. And then they're dropping from 18 to 20 inches on those. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to get on a 12-inch box to drop from 12 inches,
Yep.
or even an 18-inch box to drop from 18 inches. Like, we can just bounce to that height repeatedly. So we don't really need to get on a box. So for me, like, if we're going to get on a box, it's going to be higher than we're doing pogos. Otherwise, there's no point to the box. So yeah, I'll start those at like 24, and then I've people have gone up to 36 on that even. Yeah.
So if we go change of direction, what would be, let's say, 3 to 4 exercises you're consistently using, and then some type of assessment on change of direction?
5, 10, 5 would be probably the main assessment. Yeah, I mean, we do have the capability to use the 1080 for that, because you can measure on a cut. But that's not a path I've gone down, because it would I'd have to do it with a lot of athletes to figure out like what does good look like on the 1080 for a cut. But that's something that some of the other coaches where I'm at, I think, have done more. But yeah, I would say in terms of assessments, really the 5, 10, 5. In terms of exercises, I'll do, anything that gets the athlete stopping and turning or whatever. It tends to look more like that fun category for me. So I'll have them like sprint 5 yards and touch a pylon, and then while they're sprinting, I'm tossing the football the other direction, and they got to go touch the pylon and then go catch the football. Or I have like, jump over the hurdle while you're in the air. I'm going to throw the football somewhere. You got to go get it. Or like, curve sprints to go catch the ball, something like that. Yeah, I tend to go more of the gamification in that department. So then it's not an assessment. It's just reps. It's fun.
But you would see some success by being like, all right, let's check your 5, 10, 5. They're within a percentage, or they've dropped or whatever. It's like, okay, we're in a pretty good spot where we're at right now.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. Then general strength stuff. What would you say then, looking at that? Like, what are the top 3 to 5 lifts that you've seen? Do any lifts correlate to bigger jumps, or is it all jumps correlate to lifts? And then what would those assessments be as well?
No, lifts can make you jump higher for sure. And again, like I said before, I think there's a lot of options for getting strong, but it's really just, versions of the basics. So for me, like, just a good old back squat is like the money one. Yeah, squat. And that's probably the one that I the most have tested. And I found, especially if you're doing a good depth back squat, which I am a deep squat fan. Like, if you're getting better at that lift, then it's going to make all your other lifts better. Generally, I will say there's maybe a version of a person where if they're really strong at the knee joint and they have a good looking squat, where it's really training their quads, but then maybe they're a little less mobile, a little less naturally strong in their hips and back, then their style of squat may not like transfer to the deadlift as much or to hinging movements as much. But I'd say for the most part, like, if you're getting your back squat up, other things tend to move up with it.
Wait, say that again. So
yeah.
you're saying that if somebody say that again about the I feel like you're talking about a taller athlete possibly who has strong knees, but they might not. I guess, yeah. I can you repeat it?
Yeah. Okay. So generally, I would say a back squat is going to train your knee extension, your hip extension, even your back strength, right?
Yep.
To some degree. And so because it develops all those things, it translates to all the other lifts like pretty well. So if I get better at a back squat, I'm going to get better at a lunge or a split squat. I'm going to get better at deadlift. Me personally, I know like my snatch and clean are like directly connected with my back squat.
Yeah.
Okay. So I get lots of transfer from the back squat to any other lift. What I was saying is there might be a type of athlete that's what I would call knee dominant, where they're like naturally, and I'm sure you've seen this type of athlete, like naturally talented in the quads and the knees. They're really good at like pushing their knees forward and bending the knees, and you know, they're strong in that. They're strong in their quads. And so then the style of squat that they naturally have is like your upright, knees forward type of squat.
Yep.
And so they might be, you know, very good at the squat. But I've seen a version of that athlete which tends to be your inflexible adolescent male who has that knee talent, and so then they squat well, but they're not good at hinging. They're really tight in their hamstrings.
Okay.
And so for that type of athlete, you know, I think they might squat and get their squat up, but it may not translate to their hinging motions as much, because they're just,
Okay.
they're not actually training their hip extension as much with their squat, and so it may not
Okay, let
get
me
the same level of transfer there.
define your hinging motions. Like give me 3 or 4 of them that you would just say for everybody out there that you
I
would.
mean, barbell deadlift, RDL, clean and snatch. Honestly, those are. I mean, they're more hingy if you're
I think if
not
you're
doing
longer
like
leg, you're more.
a high hang variation, basically.
I think if you're a longer leg too, they're definitely more hingy.
Yeah, yeah.
I,
But yeah,
I
anything with the bar in your hands.
this is where I this is my argument. Okay, I actually think if you get that kid. So as you were explaining, that's why I needed you to repeat it, because I was like, we've got taller kids that I see, and there's one kid that he's a tight end at Penn State. Dog. We started with him like 8th grade.
Okay.
This kid, he's like 6'7", so he's always longer, but he's got jack quads especially for a tall kid.
Okay. Yeah.
Jumps well, sprints well. We got him, cleaning early, as like super early in his career. Like, I mean, first day.
Yeah.
Just because I would say I'm maybe the weightlifting crusader.
You're an enthusiast.
Yeah. No, but I'm not what did Tim Riley call? I'm an enthusiast, definitely. I will say though, like, I don't think everybody has to do it. I think there's athletes that we've had that's like, if I get them later, we don't make them do it.
Mm.
But I think that those athletes, this is where I was going to go, was like, if they learned, I could envision the guy who is typically not, they tend to be tighter in their hamstrings. I think if they learn to clean early, you can alleviate that issue, because they learn how to make contact, and and that's sort of how they get to understand hinging, is literally just how they make contact on a clean. I guess that's where I was going to go with that.
Okay. Okay.
I
Yeah. So
don't think it.
I would typically say like that type of athlete, like we need to teach them how to hinge.
Yeah.
But you're saying cleans can be a good way
Yeah.
to contribute to that.
But I also think at the same time, that same athlete, dude, I'm thinking about my son, actually. So my son has
Okay.
quite long legs, and he tends to hinge decently, but I've been having him do warm-ups with kettlebell swings, just because we filmed a YouTube video with him, and he's pretty strong for his age. He's doing these kettlebell swings. I'm like, the fuck are you doing? Like, and your heels are popping up. Like, you're like not extending your knees or your hips at the same time. And it took him probably 5 to 10 minutes to figure that out. But it's even like, that is, to your point, the case of, even though he's been cleaning since he was 5 years old, now he's still had to learn how to execute that hinge just on a kettlebell swing without being too much of a goon. So I think there's obviously a gray area there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the clean doesn't solve everything, like a lot
Yeah.
of people would say.
Yeah. But I mean, it's definitely a useful lift, and there's obviously a learning process associated with that that's good. And so yeah, I'm certainly not arguing against cleans or anything. I've been doing cleans and snatches for probably 17 years myself. So yeah, I'm certainly not against them. I just don't like when the narrative is like just gets a little bit too extreme where it's like, you need to be doing cleans if you want to jump higher because of this and this and this. And I'm like, well, yeah, there's a lot of people that just got their squat up and jumped higher, It's like,
Yeah. I
yeah,
like to do
so
that to pull people into a video to trigger them. But
sure, yeah.
then at the end of the video, be like, hey, you don't actually have to, but like, you're a pussy if you don't.
Very nuanced take there.
Yeah. I would. Okay. So basically, what you're saying, though, is you're not teaching somebody how to back squat like low bar, no knees forward, is what you're telling me, essentially, though.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. I like a good, like, a good Olympic style back squat that trains knee and hip extension. And yeah, I'm not teaching like a powerlifting style just to try to get as much weight up as possible. Yeah.
Okay. So I had a couple things where you talked about technique and jumps a couple times. I had a specific question related to watching younger kids jump, and then I want to actually, let's go into this question first because I think this could be a little bit more programming related. Where you mentioned, you mentioned the female athlete that you train, and when she does a full range or a split squat, you see a degradation in speed. Typically, at least in my experience, a lot of strength coaches would make this argument like, well, you got to take a couple steps backwards to make 5 steps forward, right? So maybe there's a degradation and there's a sacrifice. You're far out in training. Let's try to strengthen these positions, and see if that then elicits some type of positive response, and we see her speed, step up quite a bit faster. So in the acute setting, you might see a speed decrease on something like a flying 15, but long term, 6 months later, we see an improvement. What would you say to an argument like that?
Um, I would say, yeah, I mean, that's like pretty standard strength and conditioning for track and field approach is you do general strength and then yeah, you don't expect to like PR your 100 meters at the end of your squat phase, right?
Yeah, true.
Um, but yeah, you translate over time into more specificity, maybe less lifting in general, and you time that up with your season to run faster. Like, yes, I'm familiar with that scenario, right? Um, what I would say is that in her specific case, the response is pretty well. Yeah, first of all, I'd say that generally observing athletes, I don't see this, like real clear negative response. Obviously, if you have fatigue, if you have soreness, like there's a negative response. But in the case of this particular athlete, I'd say there's like a notable negative response. And the other thing that, a little bit unique about her is she did 8 years of gymnastics at a high level and then switched over to track and field. And so she's coming in with actually a lot of general development from gymnastics and obviously like crazy flexibility and all this stuff, and definitely, stronger than most girls her age. I started working with her at, I think, the start of 8th grade. Or no, I guess it was the summer before 8th grade. So, definitely at that point, stronger than your typical girl her age, but hadn't actually lifted weights, So I would say in response to the strength coaches saying, well, you should just squat her anyway. Like she's a bit of a unique case where
Right.
she already has a lot of the general development that you get from general strength training. Already, extremely mobile. All the structural things like, okay, if you're talking increased fascicle length, some level of hypertrophy, like all those structural things that beginners get from strength training, she kind of already had. And so, yeah, just in her case, just found a very notable negative response. And so then again, though, that doesn't mean I don't use it at all. It just means I'm managing it a little more differently than others. Where it's like, okay, let's touch on it very briefly, pull it back. Okay, now we get speed PRs. So I was doing, a few years ago, I was doing that with her, but in more of like a 6 week type of process versus a 6 month type of process.
Okay.
Because there was this very clear acute response to it. And then she also, her sophomore high school season of track, I didn't see her for several months, and she had a coach at school that was having the track team do squat and split squat like throughout the track season, and she actually started that season really strong and then finished poorly. And so that wouldn't surprise most strength coaches either, right? Like that's kind of what we were talking about, where it's like just a matter of timing it right. But just my overall read on her is that with the background in gymnastics, she's still relatively new to track. And so she needs the specific track development more than she needs general strength.
Dude, I think that statement alone is like the hardest thing for strength coaches to understand is
Yeah.
like, yo, dude, and like, dude, I'm fucking guilty where it's like I want these kids to back squat more, bench press more, do more pull-ups. Like I love this shit, but at the same time, it's like they need more time on the track, or they need more time on the runway, or they need more time in the circle because they got, especially in this case, dude, she's probably been developed as to, if there's a single sport out there that is the best at developing just talented athletes, it's gymnastics. Outside of the hand-eye coordination aspect,
Right.
it is 100% you get the best physical development. And it's like, I wouldn't even put wrestling in there because wrestlers can't fucking run. You can get
Right.
you can get a gymnast to actually run. And I think that's like the what you just said is like, yo, that's it. That's just it. Like, listen, they need more time on the track. They need more time to run to run at full speed. And if we take that away by doing too many squats, we could get this chick to squat 300 pounds. Probably you could get her to squat 300 pounds in a year,
Yeah.
probably less than
Yeah.
that.
Talented athlete. So why not?
But guess what? She's a sprinter. So to get her to squat, what do you want to do? Squat 300 pounds, or do you want her to squat, let's say 225 and run faster?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's just and it's not like a thing in general that I'm doing with athletes. I've got a girl that trains with her sometimes. They're friends, and she's been deep squatting every week lately.
Right.
Because she doesn't have that same negative response, and she has more. She's a year older, and she just has a little bit more like track and like high volume running history, and so it's just different.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's generally I'm with the strength coach on the periodization, right? It's like, yeah, we're strength training in the off season, we're going to turn it into speed later. Like, yes, I get it. In this particular case, I'm not sold on how well the turn it into speed later is going to go. Because of the response that I've seen from her in that, and so yeah, just handling it a little bit more with a little bit more artistic, creative programming options. Like, well, okay, let's get trap bar deadlift up. Let's get, like I said, she's doing box squats more often because those are, it's a little bit higher, and then you don't have the same structural stimulus. So yeah, just use like some different options of getting her stronger. Like I talked about, I'm using the cleans with her. I don't think getting her hang clean up is going to mess with her speed, or I don't think training hang clean is going to mess with her speed. But yeah, the squatting and the split squatting and stuff does take some of that toll. So yeah, just a different approach with her. And she's triple jumped 39, 4.5.
That's legit. Yeah, that's solid. That's very
Right
good.
when she turned 16.
So that's like just under 12. That's like
It's 12 meters exactly, actually.
it's like
Yeah.
like 1205.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, she's long jumped 19.1. And then she's run 12.1 in the 100.
Okay.
But like, I don't think she's even discovered her speed yet.
Hmm.
I still think there's a journey, like a track specificity journey to go on there. Which yeah, the plan is for this off season to be that key kind of level up in the speed department, because she, like I said before, she did volleyball in the fall before.
It's
So yeah.
interesting because I think that the gymnastics background, and if she finds that speed, right, like I would, not that you don't want her to be a sprinter, but I would assume based off of her upbringing and background in gymnastics, that would lead to her being a better triple or long jumper, even if she does find her speed, because she's going to be so stable, especially in the triple. Now I don't know how tall she is, but it's an interesting, I guess, dilemma, you know.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely is like a natural triple jumper, I would say. Um, yeah, she's not naturally like super quick off the ground and light on her feet. She was a natural heel striker actually when I first started working with her.
So I have this written down. I wanted you to go into this. Is like you do talk about the heel, and I think a lot of people, and I don't want to get off from this case study essentially, but I think it's important because I had two questions where, looking at a counter movement on an athlete, how do you see a counter movement with their depth on something? And especially with an approach, like an approach to a dunk or an approach to a volleyball or to the net, or an approach in this case to maybe a triple, right? Um, can you talk about the technique and using the heel, or what that, because I think that most people would standard or typically say like, avoid heel striking at all costs. Like even when people think like you should sprint on your toes. So maybe touch on the heel, and then let's diagnose a standard experience that you might have with we'll go into the counter movement after we talk about the heel.
Okay, so yeah, foot contact is a little bit of a tricky topic. So I would say if you're trying to be very light and quick off the ground, that's when you're going to be more on the forefoot, and certainly your forefoot should touch down first. So if you look at good sprinters, for example, they're all going to land on the forefoot first. Some people will like describe it as the midfoot or something because they're trying to push dorsiflexion or whatever. But whatever you want to call it, you're definitely landing on the front half of your foot first, and then depending who it is, the heel might touch the ground in the middle of the contact. But yeah, it's a forefoot touchdown, and that's when you're trying to be quick off the ground and light. Okay. Um, when you heel strike, I would say, well, again, it's tricky because first of all, you got some good distance runners that heel strike naturally, right? And it's fine. It can be efficient. But generally, if we're talking about hard heel strikes, that's going to come in a jump plant where you're trying to decelerate. Not that deceleration is the target, but if you're trying to take horizontal momentum and direct it upwards, you are going to decelerate in your plant, and so usually that's going to mean a heel strike. For a 1 foot jumper, you're almost always going to see that. There are some like rare, freaky 1 foot jumpers that will like pretty much float their heel off the ground, but you have a hard time you'll be hard pressed to find that. Yeah, it would be like your classical super springy high jumper is the type of person who would do that. I saw it from a basketball kid one time, but so almost always going to
Would
heel
Vince
strike in a
Carter
one.
heel strike before he would dunk?
Yeah. So like a 1 foot jump plant, you're like almost universally people are going to heel strike there, and that makes sense because you're decelerating and directing your momentum upwards. Same thing with a 2 foot plant. So volleyball, dunkers, etc. The first foot that touches down, the plant foot or the plant leg, we would call that, almost always like a very clear heel strike. Like the toe is way up in the ground. That's generally what you're going to see, and that makes sense because again, you are decelerating on that contact. And then the second foot tends to be more of like a flat touchdown versus a heel strike. So again, people vary, but some people will be more on the forefoot on that second foot, the block leg. Um, and so yeah, it just goes down to that: are you decelerating in that moment? And
Mhm.
same thing, a deceleration, right? Like at let's say the top of a route for a receiver in football, when
Mhm.
they're doing those hard steps to stop, they're going to heel strike. I don't know if I think that one might actually be universal. I don't I don't know if there's anybody who would not heel strike in that context. So yeah, it really just comes down to when you're decelerating hard. Then
Well, don't you think, like, what I don't get with this discussion is, like, why isn't this a universally understood concept? Because to me, it's no different than, like, if I pull a clean as a weightlifting coach, if I have an athlete pull a clean and I see that, or a snatch, and I see that their heel pops, yes, there are examples of, like some of the greatest of all time. A guy named Andrei Aramnov would pull for Belarus. He would pull and his heel would pop.
hmm,
But 99% of the best ever would pull flat footed.
yeah,
And I think, like, there's some weird, like, and in this case, even it's like, dude, if you want to jump high and you're on an approach, like, you need to strike with the heel or at least flat footed to get up. Like, that's just the way it is.
yeah.
And I never understood why this was such, like, a weird discussion, but and maybe I don't know. Like, I've always sort of felt like it's pretty normal.
Yeah, I think people I don't know. They tend to just they want like a good and bad. Like
I was actually watching Charles Austin highlights this morning on high jump, and I'm trying to even think, like, if as a jumper, maybe he's not as twitchy as home, but, like, he was a twitchy dude. And maybe you would see, but even then, like, home, I'm trying to think. I feel like they all would heel strike, even off of a one leg approach.
yeah, I mean, again, I think I've only seen it a couple times where there's like a high jumper who his heel like barely touched the ground at all, and then again, I saw that one basketball kid who did it, and I don't know. I mean, and they were both speed jumpers, with the butt kick in their swing leg.
Hmm.
But it's not like all speed jumpers do that. Most of them don't,
Hmm.
or yeah, probably all but a few. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what like crazy trait that those guys have that allows them to do that. Um, but yeah, I think people just like to think of things in terms of black and white, like, oh, heel striking's bad, forefoot's good, or the other thing that comes to mind is like people like things that are visually appealing,
Hmm.
and maybe the heel strike just like looks ugly to them or something. I don't know exactly what's going through people's head, but yeah, I mean we use our bodies in lots of different ways for different tasks. Um, but then yeah, I was gonna say when you start jumping for distance, that's where you're in sort of a middle ground of okay, we got to get off the ground, but we also want to maintain speed,
Hmm.
and so. Again, almost universally, I think in long jump you see a heel strike, but there's probably some flat foot long jump takeoffs out there. But then triple jump is another one where I think what's coached is like that flat foot touchdown. And that's because, yeah, that, you're moving fast and you have to maintain your speed, but you also have to get off the ground. And so you need a little bit of time. And so you have to, the foot's got to touch down a little bit more in front of you and push behind you a little bit more. And so that tends to come with, yeah, like that flat foot, or even you'll see the heel strike and triple jump as well. Which yeah, most people might think that that's bad, but or kind of the lay person might look at that and think that looks bad, but that's just how people get the job done sometimes. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's just it's an I think it's interesting, and at the same time also important for people. I mean, even somebody who could be watching this and they want to learn how to dunk. It's like, yo, if you want a faster approach, like if you have a fast approach, you will likely have to. I mean, you're going to heel strike on the last 2 to 3 steps or 2 steps, at least the second to last step, the penultimate step before you're going to transfer everything vertically. Like it's
Yeah.
gonna have to get done. Um, I guess that's where I would want to go in with the counter movement. Thinking about like a 13 to 15-year-old kid here. If I have a kid that's jumping, and I see that they have a higher counter movement, um, and this is going off the heel discussion. How do you train that to get them? Like, do you want them to decrease their counter movement? Do you want to do exercises later to try and, like, is the counter movement telling you something of where they are as a structure? How do you look at stuff like that?
So we're talking standing vert generally
Yeah, or
here?
yeah, standing vert, or let's say we're doing like, let's say double leg bounds for 10 yards, and there's one kid, and one kid gets or two kids get it in 3 jumps or 4 jumps, but and it's the exact same amount of jumps, but one can do it a lot quicker because the counter movement is shorter. How would you approach
Right.
altering the second kid who has a longer counter movement or deeper counter movement?
So yeah, I mean, I would say your your physical traits and abilities, they show up in lots of different movements, right? So yeah, if we're looking at a standing vert, a deep counter movement is typically gonna show you someone's strong if they even, or at least reasonably strong, if they even bother to get down there. Um, because it tells you that they're actually strong enough in a squat position to use that range for a jump. Um, and particularly they're probably a little bit stronger in the quads, although there's also the version of like you do a deep hinge at the hips
Mm-hmm.
and then and sort of use that. I kind of have a jump like that because I'm a lot stronger at the hips than at the knees,
I'm like
especially
that too.
nowadays with my knee pain and my old age. Um, but so yeah, that deeper counter movement, that's going to show you that someone has some strength to work with. The short counter movement in a standing vert is tricky. I would say if someone's real short in the standing vert, sometimes it shows you there's not very strong, they're undeveloped. Okay, but then there's also the sprinter standing vert where they got a 40-inch vert and they barely have to bend their knees because they're
Right.
just that explosive, and that's why they're the most explosive athletes in the world, Dane. Um, no, I'm just messing with
I
you.
feel it. I feel attacked.
But but so there is
They're
a
stiffer too. Like that. That's another thing too. Is like their joints are innately stiffer in most cases, and that enables them to have a shorter
yeah,
counter movement and
and
be
so
so
it's
freaking
wild when you see
explosive.
that type of athlete that not only do they jump so high, but they bend their knees only a little bit to do it, and it's like, man, they are just so. I mean, they're just tapping into some freaking talent there. So it's explosive and then probably a little bit elastic too, where they're dropping down fast, even though it's not very far, and so they're loading their connective tissue like really fast, and that just translates into this big output in a very short period of time. And it's like, okay, that's why they're a sprinter, I guess. That's
How do you define
it makes
elastic?
sense. Say that again.
How would you define elastic?
Um, well, I mean, I use the term elasticity, um, which is essentially your ability to store and release kinetic energy, I would say. But particularly, I tend to use it to mean like your ability to do that quickly. Yeah, I would say that elastic and elasticity is kind of a questionable term to use because it does have like a physics definition.
Well, so Aaron Gadsden, who coached Olympic champ two of his triple jumpers just got third and fourth at Diamond League final
Yeah.
last week. And like when we bullshit about stuff, he'll say Rojas is the most elastic jumper ever, the Venezuelan chick. And I'm like, well, what
Yeah.
does that even mean? And then he'll say I want to say he said it's recruiting under like 0.1 seconds, or having it might be a 0.1 ground contact time. And then when I brought this up to Christoph Kipp, he's like, that's technically not what elastic jumping would be, or elastic. That's why I wanted to see your definition, because I'm always like, I can see what you're saying and I can see how she jumps because of how fast she is, or how fast she was. But I'm also like, this goes back to the explosiveness comment of like, what the hell is it even defined as, I guess,
Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky because, the human body is obviously super complex. Human movement is super complex. And so we kind of like, we have measurements of things, and then we search for like descriptive terms to use.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you how I started using the term elastic was the concept of an elastic collision in physics
Okay.
is it means a high restitution of kinetic energy. So if you think of dropping a ball and it bounces up and it bounces almost as high as you dropped it from,
Yeah, like a bouncy
um,
ball or something.
then then it had an elastic collision on the ground, or in terms of horizontal, like playing billiards, and the cue ball hits the other ball and it transfers almost all of the kinetic energy to that other ball. There's very small loss of energy there, so that's an
And the cue ball
elastic collision.
stops.
Say that again.
The cue ball stops, but this ball goes.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So that's the concept of an elastic collision, and so I kind of stole that from the physics concept and said, okay, well, when someone is very good at getting off the ground quickly and bouncing repeatedly to the same height, we could say that's an elastic collision. Now the problem is obviously the human body is a lot more complex than a ball. And so, we're putting energy into every one of those collisions. And so it's not the same thing as just a restitution of kinetic energy, because you're actually using your muscles and using energy in those collisions. So it's not like a perfect translation. But so that's where I say, okay, but if you're better at doing that quickly, because look, anybody can jog and you're repeatedly bouncing off the ground, very small bounces when you jog, and you can do that, for a long time. Most people can do that. And so in that sense, you could say, well, like everyone's elastic then? Well, no, but if the people that are good at doing it quickly, that's who is elastic.
So that's
Um,
where's the time frame? So you're saying quickly, and I would say quickly equals time frame. Where's the definition of time frame? And that's what biomechanics is failing us on.
right. And so, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to say sprinter elasticity, you would say under a tenth of a second is probably, a
Mm-hmm.
reasonable time frame, we could say. Um, but then that changes when you talk about triple jump or long jump, because obviously the time frame changes. So,
So
yeah,
this is actually
it's a
here's a
little
good
messy.
example. Or yeah. So maybe our homework before we would ever have another podcast is that we have to come up with a standard definition that we can, at least you and I can accept, for elastic explosiveness, or elastic whatever, human elastic collisions with the ground. Um so
RSI four or hhigher.
yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. Um here's and I wanted to, so I damn I because I know we don't have that much time left, but I wanted to, there's like three things. How do you train your fascia was going to be one question,
Oh
but let's
Lord.
let's get that out of, let's just not, because I love seeing, you know what I got triggered by? You have a video on Instagram of people doing like towel curls, and I actually like doing towel curls for my feet and my like, because I do run quite a bit. So if I
Mm-hmm.
if I feel like shin splints a little, we do, like, I walk on a PVC pipe every day, but then I do these towel curls, and I don't do the shit that they talk about. I don't even know what fascia training is outside of just like training.
Yeah.
That triggered me though. I felt bad about myself for a little bit. I wanted to share that with you.
It was not, see, it's not, the point is not that toe curls are not good. The point is, what do you believe that they're doing, and do they have any impact
Yeah,
on any particular impact on fascia?
right, right.
Um, yeah, and there's a particular guru slash business that claims things about toe retraction and fascia. That's what I was going after there.
Dude, that shit's so stupid. It's like
I
it's
know.
so crazy. I always want to like I want to talk to one of these guys and do a podcast and be like, "What are you talking about?" Like, shut up. Anyway, whatever. Okay. Um I want to ask the question. Let's go. Give me the one of the big. Give me your biggest lesson that you've learned as a coach, like maybe a failure you've had that has taught you some type of lesson, and then I want to get into like the actual last question. But give me something that like you've struggled with, or in the past you look back and you're like, why the hell did I do that? Like that was a big mistake, and I learned from that.
Hmm. Um.
And it can't be programming cleans because I'll get upset.
Right.
No, yeah, you can say that. I don't care. Whatever. I don't care.
Boy, I mean, there's been so many lessons. I don't know if one in particular sticks out. I mean, I'll say this. It came to mind earlier when we were talking about this jumper, this long and triple jumper, and I talked about the needs the track specificity more than general strength, and then you said yes, that's what we're talking about. There's more of a broad lesson there, I think, with young kids and general strength training, and there is a pretty pervasive philosophy, I would say, that uh, general strength is kind of like this fundamental thing, and it's a good place to start young kids with training, and then also I don't know about you, but like I got an exercise science degree. I went through strength conditioning classes, and there's this narrative there of low level athletes benefit a lot from strength, and then as they get to higher levels, they need to be trained in a more specific manner, right? And there's diminishing returns, and sort of this general
Mm-hmm.
concept. And I would say that when I first started working with 12, 13 year olds, like that type of age, I expected to get the experience of, all right, if they do some goblet squats and some lunges, like they're going to start jumping higher and sprinting faster, like right away.
Right.
And because I had experience with that happening, but not with that age group. It was with college age.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
And I expected the same thing to happen because, like, oh, they're at a much lower level. Like, surely these goblet squats are going to just turn them into a better standing vertical jumper, right? And I found that I didn't have any example. I don't know exactly how long it was, but I had trained several of these kids that this age. I didn't have any example of them like doing this, some squats and lunges and then immediately performing better in their jumps.
Yeah.
And I was like, why is this harder with them than it was with a 20-year-old college athlete? Like, I thought it was supposed to be the other way around. I had this other friend who was a sprinter on the track team at UW La Crosse, and then he like finished his career. He did one squat workout, and he jumped like 3 inches higher the next week.
Yeah. Right.
Like, why? Like, I thought it was supposed to be easier with the younger, less developed population, and harder, and you have to be more specific with the older, but so then eventually came across, or like kind of figured out, it's like, well, the young kid doesn't have their specific development yet.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't uh, you know all the coordination, all the jumping reps, all the explosiveness, all the elastic capabilities
Right.
they haven't developed that with like years of sprinting and jumping in sports yet.
And skipping.
Yeah, and
Like,
yeah, all these things, and especially it's becoming more and more of an issue now with technology and the way kids are growing up and all this stuff. I don't know about you, but I grew up outside, freaking just playing every which thing, every game we could think of,
right.
and uh, and so now you have a kid who maybe hasn't grown up doing that as much, and now they're 12, 13, they're trying to get into sports. School sports I think started seventh grade here, and so now they don't have their foundation of of athleticism or of specificity, and so then general strength doesn't solve their problems.
Right. Right.
Doesn't mean it's bad to do, doesn't mean it's detrimental, but it's just like it's only one piece of the puzzle, and there's so many other pieces you got to get in place. And so yeah, prior to working with that population, working with more of the college age, it was like, oh yeah, well these kids or these men or these women, like they grew up playing sports already, and they've done it for way more years than this 12-year-old has. So they have more of that specific in place. And so now you add the general strength, and it translates, and it produces great results even in the short term.
The other funny part that you're even like going off of that is like, and when we did a podcast with Aaron, but I see this even with the throwers, is that the more experience someone gets in a sport, they actually benefit more from general strength than any book recognizes, because they're using it as like a structural stability aspect of like, okay, this is going to help me hold form. And if
Mm-hmm.
I dial in my movement in my technique, because everything becomes so technically derived in your training, everything like as a thrower or as a jumper or as a sprinter, you've got to be on with your technique. And you now know how to use general strength as this aspect of development or of structural stability. So like we did a training session with Daniel Stahl, who's an Olympic champion discus thrower, and like the dude's deadlifting 600 for 3 or 5 reps, whatever it was, and then does like benches and power cleans and stuff. And I was talking with his coach, and he's like, well, dude, he feels so much healthier in the circle. He can take more throws. It's not about the weight on the bar. It's about him just
Yeah,
being able to get more throws. And I think that's where those books also just lack that understanding of like, it's not about a performance enhancing thing at that level. It is literally about enabling their body to take more reps to dial in their technique. And that's it. Like,
sure.
it's just
Yep.
stability.
Yep. So yeah, I would say there's like I don't deny sort of the general strength and then specific later and diminishing returns, like that has validity to
Yeah.
it, but there's
Yep.
almost like a reverse narrative as well,
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, if we go back earlier before their whole history of athleticism and sports, if we go back before that, we actually need to start specific,
Yeah.
or maybe just maybe
Or
not specific.
make sure they're getting skips and sprints and jumps in with their training
Yeah.
at a much higher volume than we've previously understood.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and so yeah, maybe calling it specific is not a thing, because it's not. We're not talking about like play one sport your whole childhood, but we're talking
Right.
about, yeah, like doing, like you said, explosive and bouncy and elastic and a high variety of those things. You actually need that first, and then general strength works better later.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that was a big lesson that it wasn't like I had one bad mistake that I made with some athlete or something, but it was just this observation of like, man, I really thought this 13-year-old was going to get better from doing this. And it's just not like, it's just not showing up the way I thought it would.
Right.
And so, yeah, that was, kind of just over time, this group of athletes sort of taught me that lesson.
Okay, last question. How do you define explosiveness?
Yeah. Oh man, I don't think I have an answer to that one. Hey, impulse divided by time is a pretty good pretty good
Well,
measurement. But you know what impulse divided by time is? That's average force. So, um, yeah, I think the difficulty in defining that is like, what movement do you pick to measure, right? So, yeah, you know, the most explosive athlete in a bound is not the most explosive athlete in a throw. Or the most explosive in a standing vert is not the most explosive in, you know, some other in a, let's just say, a power snatch,
in a,
right? Like, it's
or a
just,
sprint.
yeah, there's just a lot of variety there. So it's hard to like pick one movement or one physics output to measure it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, average force in some time frame could be some type of metric, but even then it's like, okay, average force during what movement are you going to pick? So
Well,
I
and
don't
that's
know.
where
That's a tough one.
I think that's what pisses me off with like something like the NSCA is you sit there and you're like, dude, these are all questions, and you've done this a little bit. Watson's done this on his Instagram where it's like, and I try and do this as well, where I try to quantify like to a point, like, okay, at this age group or at this age level, try to get this many lifts and this many jumps and this many squats, this many, whatever sprints, right? And the fact that one that and I'm not saying that it's perfect across all populations, but there's like a general context that then you can sort of mix and match. And the fact that the NSCA can't come out and be like, yo, we spend all this money. Let's just define explosiveness for a bound or a triple jump or a sprint or a snatch or a ballistic aspect like a shot putter, so that then we can see this like, okay, or even defining elasticity. I would try and listen to all these jumps coaches or all the sprint coaches or all the throwers or whatever, right? Like the gymnasts, these are the most explosive athletes on the planet, the weightlifters. And you say, okay, how can we create 3 to 5 different models of what explosiveness is, and then they're defined by these areas, and then we can look at it. And I had other questions I wanted to get into, but we've got to get going. Is if I watch somebody like Charles Austin or Stefan Holm, and I'm watching them just because I like watching old shit, and I go, okay, these guys are dogs. How can I use their movement for sport training? You could almost look at their explosiveness column or pillar or category or umbrella, and then try to transfer that over to another sporting realm where, like, oh, basketball high jumpers transfer really well to being a basketball player. Well, that's how we could, and I think that's where it's like, when you pose that question, one, I wasn't being clear, so that was a great question, but two, it was also like, we don't know, but we should try to figure that out, and we should
Sure.
come up with it so that there's some type of universal comprehension amongst all sport coaches. Like, you don't need to be as explosive as a shot putter if you're a triple jumper, in the sense of explosiveness for a shot putter, right?
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, if we had a battery of tests,
Yeah.
um, yeah, could be useful.
And metrics with time, that's
Yes.
probably, yeah.
Metrics with
So it's,
time. Yeah, that's a big point to make. Don't just be a jump mat superstar. I said that one time.
yeah. So it's almost average force in a time frame, or some metric in a time frame plus load equals these types of explosiveness, plus or minus load, depending, I guess. Because then you could even argue, like when you said the sprinters, I was like, I mean, we could even make this argument. Like if you look at when Kipchoge ran, like when he did the Ineos sub 2 hour marathon, that wasn't legal, but because of his shoes. But like, well, let's just say, you could argue, oh, well, he was explosive as hell for 2 hours, right? Like that's where
Right.
so I don't know. Okay, Coach Back, where can people find you? We want to plug your Instagram. That's also going to be in the description, your website, and any programming from you as well.
Jump.science on Instagram. Also, 2X athlete on Instagram. That's kind of my speed focused account,
Okay.
which, one day I'll be more attentive on it. But yeah, those would be the two main places. I do have a 2X athlete YouTube as well. my old YouTube channel was Jump Science on YouTube. I haven't uploaded to that for a long time though. Yeah, tried to make a little switch over to like speed focused content for well, yeah, I mean, I just didn't want to post all sprinting stuff on Jump Science. Doesn't really make sense. So wanted
Right.
another outlet for speed content. So yeah, those are the places. I do have Jump Science programs, which there's a link on Instagram for that. And
Okay, so it looks like Coach Back's phone died. Biggest factor here, you can you can click the first link in the description, check out jump.science on Instagram, and you can pick up his programming. And the biggest factor, I think, for he and I is just we got to clarify what explosiveness training is and try to dial in all those different aspects around performance-based work. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, peace.